Growing up in a lower middle class area, I learned about closeness from my neighborhood and schools. During college, I stayed at home because one of the world's top engineering universities was nearby. I helped girls with homework, and they tutored me in that field. From ages 18 to 21, I was fine, and the girls seemed satisfied with my skills too. I gained a reputation for being patient, discreet, and kind during the act. I did it with 11 different women, mostly without serious relationships. The exception was Josephine, whose real name was Whitney. Josephine, my age and height, was tall, curvy, and very active. She played sports and aimed to own a Tex-Mex video studio. I helped her with math and business topics. We were close 6 times, each encounter leaving a lasting impression. She would call late at night, inviting me over. I never fell in love with Josephine, but I really liked her and would have done anything for her, even without the intimacy. During my senior year of college, I developed an advanced, programmable, encrypted proximity detector, similar to EasyPass but for secure systems. It was adopted by corporations, government agencies, and the military, requiring me to obtain a security clearance for patenting. The inventions brought substantial royalties, leading me to establish 2 companies for product sales and research. My lawyers created a network of shell and holding corporations to manage them, with me as the ultimate owner. Only the CEOs and CFOs knew I was in charge. To others, I was the head of new product engineering. By 24, I had set up these structures and sought a serious relationship despite my social anxiety. After various dating attempts, I met Patricia at 26, who was the most attractive woman to show real interest in me. Patricia showed no interest in my work, which proved useful for a prenuptial agreement. Gail, my trusted attorney, insisted on a prenup, stating that stocks, interests, or royalties from companies or patents would remain separate property. Patricia had her father review it and signed without question. Our intimate life was always satisfying. After 2.5 years of marriage and our first child, Amber, I ran into Josephine on the street during a visit to my parents' house. I had offered to buy my parents a new house, but they preferred their current neighborhood. Josephine looked great and was better dressed than I had ever seen her. We went for coffee, and she told me about her new venture, a XSX website, but was struggling with finances, needing an additional $25,000. I suggested we meet again in a week, same time, same place, and I might introduce her to an investor. She was thrilled and gave me a big hug and a kiss on the cheek when we parted. I thought about it for a week. $25,000 was a small amount to me, and despite the controversial nature of her business idea, I still cared about her. A week later, we met again, and she looked even better than before. She wore more revealing clothes that showcased her amazing body, just as it had been when we were together in college. Her face and hair looked better than ever. As soon as our coffee arrived, I handed her an envelope containing $25,000 in cash. Josephine was deeply moved. It surprised me to see her crying, given her tough exterior. She offered me a stake in the website, but I politely refused. I wanted it to remain a gift without any ownership. She flirted, suggesting she could give me the best experience of my life with her body and drive. Despite believing she could fulfill her promise, I declined again, expressing my love for my wife. "Your wife is one lucky woman," Josephine said tearfully as we parted. "If there's ever anything I can do for you, just ask." "Wishing you great success," I said with a smile, giving her a tight hug. I was a bit uncomfortable when I got aroused during the hug, and quickly pulled away when I noticed. She was polite and didn't mention it. Patricia and I had 2 more children, another girl named Whitney. No, she wasn't named after Josephine, it was my wife's choice. And then a boy named Jerry. While closeness with Patricia remained fulfilling, I gradually realized she was somewhat shallow and focused on material things. Despite this, I truly loved her. She was the only woman I ever loved. More importantly, she had given me 3 wonderful children. Amber, who was 12 at the time, inherited her mother's beauty and the best parts of both our personalities. She was as intelligent as me, testing at a genius level, but much more socially adept. Whitney, at 10, was a beautiful girl with some of my features. Not as striking as Patricia's or Amber's, but incredibly caring, loving, and empathetic. She brightened any room and was intelligent too. Jerry, at 8, was a fun-loving and athletic boy, possibly taking after Patricia's side of the family. I developed an interest in baseball and basketball to bond with him. He was always upbeat, got along well with his sisters, and never spoke ill of anyone. Despite having amazing children, Patricia wasn't a great mother. Our biggest disagreements were about raising the kids. Patricia had a strained relationship with Amber, often being overly strict and hurtful. By the time Amber turned 12, she refused to go anywhere with her mother unless I came along. This became problematic when Patricia wanted to take the kids to her family's lake house for a week while I had to work. I had to persuade Amber to go and ensure Patricia treated her well during the trip. Patricia had better interactions with Whitney and Jerry, but still had moments of difficulty with them. Although Patricia was a stay-at-home mom, I spent as much time with the kids as she did, often providing more focused and quality time. After 15 years of marriage and 3 wonderful kids, I was driving home from the airport after a one-night business trip. It was around 1 p.m. Although I had informed Patricia of my itinerary, she likely hadn't paid attention. I wasn't sure if she would be home to greet me, but I hoped for some intimate time together before the kids returned from school around 3:30. As I stopped at a sign about to turn onto my street, I noticed Roger Mayberry's distinctive red Corvette. He was in the driver's seat, playing with the radio as music blared. Roger was a top salesperson in one of my companies, specializing in military sales. Despite not being an engineer, he understood our technology well and had a high-level security clearance. Curious why Roger was in the area, I pulled into my driveway and entered the house, not seeing Patricia on the first floor. I ascended the staircase to the second floor, my shoes echoing on the marble hallway. Near our bedroom, I heard a sultry voice saying, "Did you forget something, Raj? Or did you decide to make another white fluid deposit?" In shock, I entered the master bedroom and found Patricia without clothes with cream between her legs. Instantly grasping the situation, I felt overwhelmed by anger, disgust, and sadness. I remember staggering back before my memory fades until I woke up in the hospital. Regrettably, in an instant, I grasped the situation fully. Anger, disgust, anxiety, hatred, and fear raced through my mind at lightning speed. I must have stood there frozen, mouth agape, overwhelmed by the surge of emotions. A deep, dark cloud of overwhelming sadness engulfed me. I remember staggering back a few steps, but after that, my memory fades until I woke up in the hospital. A monitor alerted the nursing station, and within seconds, a nurse and doctor rushed into my room. "How are you feeling, Mr. Banks?" asked a friendly nurse named Nancy, smiling. "My head feels like it's being squeezed in a vice," I groaned. "We're glad to see you waking up so fast," Nancy said cheerfully, checking my wrist and glancing at a monitor beside my bed. "Why am I in the hospital, and how did I get here?" I asked, just as the doctor entered the room. "Mr. Banks, I'm Dr. Petra," introduced a short, pleasant Indian female doctor. "Let me check your eyes first, and then I'll explain everything," she continued. With Nurse Nancy holding my wrist, Dr. Petra used a small light to examine my eyes without shining it directly into them, moving it back and forth for about 2 minutes. When she finished, Nurse Nancy let go. Dr. Petra smiled and explained that I had a concussion. According to my wife, I had tripped in the bedroom, fallen on the marble floor, and hit my head. Fortunately, my vital signs were good, and the concussion was less severe than initially feared. Suddenly, overwhelming sadness hit as I remembered why I fell. I yelled for a barf bag, and Nurse Nancy quickly placed a container under my chin. Dr. Petra noted that the vomiting could suggest a more serious concussion, but there were no other signs. I asked if it could be from recalling an emotional crisis before I fell. Dr. Petra confirmed that this was very possible and asked if I had experienced such a crisis. I grumbled that I didn't handle it well emotionally upon seeing another man's white fluid leaking from my wife. My 3 kids rushed in eagerly, each trying to reach me first. "Darlings, don't touch Daddy's head or neck," I chuckled as I tried to hug all 3 of them with my arms. They were talking all at once, each more excited than the other. Despite my physical and emotional state, I couldn't help but chuckle. A real laugh might have hurt, but a chuckle felt necessary. After 15 minutes, Nancy spoke to Patricia, who then said, "Children, Daddy needs to rest, so we have to go. Kiss his hands goodbye, and we'll visit him again tomorrow." The kids kissed my hands and waved as they left. Amber felt better, Jerry seemed fine, but Whitney teared up seeing me in the hospital bed and quickly turned away. As they left, Patricia told them to meet her in the elevator lobby and approached me slowly. Unprepared for my reaction, I closed my eyes and listened. "David, I'm really sorry you had to see me like that. I never wanted you to find out. I regret not being the wife you deserve. I hope we can talk this through when you're feeling better," she said, her voice wavering with a mix of remorse and sadness, though without real tears. When I didn't respond, she added, "Maybe you'll feel like talking tomorrow. If so, just call me." Her final words were revealing. It was clear she had no intention of visiting me in the hospital unless I asked for a conversation. Otherwise, she wouldn't show up. Dr. Petra returned about 20 minutes after Patricia left. After examining me again, she remarked, "You don't seem too upset after talking with your wife." "I didn't talk to her," I replied flatly. "But even though I'm still deeply saddened by what's happened, I think I can channel my emotions into action. I won't be sick again." "That's good to hear," she said with a smile. "Doctor, how much longer do I have to stay here?" "I recommend one more night, then if your checkup is good, you can leave. But you need to take it easy for at least a week and definitely stay away from the office for 3 or 4 days." "I insist," she replied firmly, with as much authority as a 5-foot-tall woman could muster. "I promise," I chuckled, then reached out and took her hand. "But please, don't tell my wife you're releasing me Friday morning. I can't ask you to lie, but if she asks, could you suggest I might have to stay until Saturday?" "I can manage that," Dr. Petra chuckled. "As long as I don't have to outright lie to a direct question. I'll tell Nurse Jenkins the same." After eating a full dinner, I called my parents, who, for reasons that seemed obvious, Patricia hadn't contacted, phoned my assistant at home, and requested a legal pad and pen. That night, I felt too out of it to start writing down what I needed to do, but I planned to get organized first thing in the morning. Patricia arrived with the kids again around 3:50 on Thursday afternoon. Just as I expected, she hadn't bothered to visit earlier in the day, and I certainly wasn't going to reach out to her, although Nancy mentioned Patricia called the nursing station once to check on me. By the time the kids arrived on Thursday, I was feeling much better. It wasn't just because I was healing physically, but also because I had a completely productive day. Several people from my office visited, along with my lawyer, Gail, who handled my prenup, and my parents joined me for lunch. None of it had anything to do with my research on proximity sensors. It was all about planning my life beyond work. After a delightful half hour with the kids, as I had instructed Nancy earlier, she came in and told me I needed rest. Patricia did the same routine as the first day, but this time I kept my eyes open when she spoke to me. "Sweetheart, you didn't call today to ask me to come discuss our situation," she said softly. "I guess I wasn't important enough for you to check if I was alive or dead unless I called, huh?" I replied, trying to keep the sarcasm in check, though not entirely succeeding. "That's not fair, honey," she murmured softly. "I didn't want to bother you if you weren't up for talking." "I'll probably be ready to talk this weekend, darling," I retorted in a snarky tone, once they let me out. "David, again, I'm really sorry. I hope we can move past this," she muttered. She held my hand and kissed it, but I showed no reaction. "Bye," she said quietly, giving a small wave as she left. It wasn't lost on me that she didn't say she loved me or that she would end things with Roger Mayberry. The only real regret I sensed was that she got caught. The remaining 10% of my plan, which I hadn't perfected yet, would be easy to figure out now. Just before visiting hours ended, Patricia's parents came to see me. I was a bit surprised until they subtly hinted at the reason for their visit. Apparently, Patricia thought it would look bad if she threatened me with losing the kids in case of a divorce, so she had her parents convey the message instead. "Patricia has shared with us about her mistake," her mother said, holding my hand. "Oh, really? What's that?" I asked sarcastically after a long pause from her mother. "You know exactly what it is. It's what caused your accident. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive her, David. You're such a good person and a loving father, and not being with your kids every day would devastate you," her mother continued. "You're right about that, Ruth," I replied somberly. My solemn tone was just an act. Securing sole custody of the kids was paramount in my plan. After a few more minutes of obligatory conversation following Patricia's parents' delivery of their daughter's message, they departed. Any uncertainty about what I needed to do was now gone. Friday morning, Dr. Petra conducted another examination and then approved my release from the hospital. "Remember, take it easy for at least a week," she advised. "Scout's honor," I joked, attempting a Boy Scout salute despite never having been one. Dr. Petra chuckled, which was a good sign. I expressed my gratitude to Nancy and tried to give her a $500 tip, but she couldn't accept it due to hospital rules. Instead, I gave her a cautious hug and left with my assistant, Jack. By 10 a.m., taking revenge on Roger Mayberry would be simple. I could have him fired. But that wouldn't be enough. I wanted to ruin his career. Simply letting him find another job with similar pay wouldn't suffice as punishment. I needed to ensure he lost his security clearance, making it impossible for him to secure a job with comparable compensation or status. After consulting with Gail and a divorce specialist she recommended, and after obtaining Roger's bank account details from payroll, since his salary was directly deposited, my next step was to meet with Josephine. Why her? She would help me secure sole custody of my kids. Jack drove me to Josephine's office, but I asked him to wait in the car. Even though Jack would be fully informed of my plans, I needed to speak with Josephine privately. I had called ahead, but Josephine still seemed pleasantly surprised to see me. "Whoa there, Josephine," I chuckled as she hurried toward me. "I have a concussion, so I can't give you the big hug I'd like. How about we settle for kissing each other's hands?" "You rascal," she giggled. "You probably got the concussion, just so I couldn't smother you." We exchanged hand kisses, a less than satisfying greeting under the circumstances, but it would suffice for now. Josephine looked fantastic. She was dressed stylishly yet professionally, and appeared as slim as she did when she was 18. There were a few gray hairs, but they actually softened her features. She was still incredibly attractive. "Come into my office," she said firmly, taking hold of my arm. After expressing my happiness at seeing Josephine again, I got straight to the point. "I need your help, Josephine," I said, my sadness creeping back. "Anything, David," she said, gripping my hand. "You have no idea how much I want to help you, no matter what it is. You helped me achieve my dream, so as long as it doesn't involve killing someone, count me in." That remark and her wide smile lifted my spirits more than I thought possible. "All right, here goes," I chuckled. I spared no detail in explaining what had happened and what part of my reaction needed her assistance. This included emphasizing how much my kids meant to me, even showing her photos of them. When she heard that my middle child's name was Whitney, she froze. "You named her Whitney?" she gasped. I knew exactly what she was thinking, and considering the situation, there was no reason not to embellish a little. "Yes, after my favorite person from before I got married," I replied, with a big grin. Her eyes welled up, she started crying, and between sobs she muttered, "You jerk! I've only cried twice in the last 10 years, and both times were because of you." I smiled and squeezed her hand. "Hey, tears of joy are a good thing. I could use some right now." "How can I help make that happen?" she asked, wiping away her tears. "I need you to publish featuring my wife on your website and make payments to her bank account for it." Once she recovered from the initial shock, we had a thorough discussion about the situation. She had a lot of good ideas, and one particularly brilliant one. "You need to make sure there's no way this can be traced back to you, especially considering our past association," she advised. "Association? Is that what you're calling it?" I chuckled. "Shut up," she giggled. "It's my turn to educate you. I know someone who can handle this on a PayX site even bigger than mine, no questions asked. You just need to send money to him and he'll deposit it into your wife's bank account. Let me call him right now." In a quick 4-minute phone call, Josephine arranged everything with her friend. She instructed me on the video format and how the money transfer would work. "Also, my friend will need your wife's signature on a contract that includes a release. Can you trick her into signing it or forge it convincingly?" "I can handle it," I assured her. "I'll email it to you today," she said. "Wait until tomorrow. I'll set up a new email account at the library specifically for this purpose, and I'll email you from there once she signs." I grinned. I left Josephine's office feeling exhilarated. I took a risk by giving her a gentle kiss on the lips before leaving. Luckily, shortly after we married, my wife insisted on having a credit card and bank account solely in her name. I hadn't bothered to check them before, but I would now. I could easily find the numbers on documents she left in the den at home. I had a lot going for me as I planned my revenge. I had bank account numbers for both Roger and Patricia, Patricia's credit card number, enough of my own money to fund whatever I needed, and Josephine's assistance. Plus, my assistant Jack was completely loyal and reliable. I knew I could count on him for anything. Let me tell you about Jack. He's not just my assistant. He's one of my highest paid employees after the CEOs and CFOs of my companies. With his engineering degree, he's great at crunching numbers and making technical improvements to my sometimes crazy ideas. He's also willing to do whatever it takes to help me out. That's why he picked me up from the hospital and waited for me at Josephine's office. Oh, and another thing. He was a Division I football player in college, starting at middle linebacker his senior year. Standing at 6'2" and 245 pounds, he's almost all muscle. He struggles to find suit jackets that don't burst at the seams. Sure, things could go wrong with my revenge plans, but I had planned carefully and had to remain optimistic. After Jack dropped me off at my house without going inside to see if Patricia was there, I had lunch and then called Patricia's cell. "Hello, darling. I'm so glad you called. Would you like me to come visit you?" she cheerfully greeted, seeing my number on her caller ID. "That won't be necessary," I replied coldly. "I got released early and I'll pick up the kids and take them for milkshakes. We'll be home around 5:30. Oh, I should make a nice homecoming dinner for you, she said, trying to sound upbeat. And don't spoil their appetites, I cut her off. Thanks for the parenting advice, I said sarcastically. See you at 5:30. The kids were thrilled to see me, asking about my health and excitedly sharing their activities. They were even more delighted when I announced we were going for milkshakes at their favorite malt shop. Once we were all enjoying our shakes, I decided to open up to them. Kids, I want you to understand that some things will be different in the future, and none of it is your fault. I began calmly and straightforwardly. Amber wasn't fooled for a second. She quickly figured out where this was going. If you and Mom get divorced, I'm staying with you, Amber blurted out. Are you guys getting divorced? Whitney asked, her face showing concern. Now let's not jump to conclusions, I reassured them, especially Whitney, who looked suddenly downcast. Mom and I are having some problems, and I'm not sure how things will turn out. But one thing I want you to know is that we both love you very much, and you three are not to blame for any of this. Amber surprised me again. You love us with all your heart, but does Mom even have one? Mommy loves us, Jerry chimed in. Don't be so sure, Squirt, Amber shot back. Trying to keep the peace, I gently placed my hand on Amber's. Sweetheart, I know Mom loves all of you deeply. Sometimes she struggles to show it. Let's not think badly of her, okay? Let's hope things work out. Whitney sniffled quietly, but Jerry and Amber seemed to recover quickly, especially when Jerry eagerly asked, Are you coming to my Little League game at noon tomorrow, Dad? We're playing against the Ravens and I'm pitching. I wouldn't miss it for anything, buddy, I chuckled. What plans do you girls have on Saturday? I asked cheerfully. I missed my usual Thursday update after being in the hospital for 3 days. By the time we got home around 5:20, all 3 kids seemed calm. During Patricia's greeting, I made sure one of the children was always between us to avoid any physical contact with her. After the kids went to bed that night, I headed to the guest room. Don't you want to talk? Patricia asked. I've got a splitting headache from my concussion and I just need to take my pain pills and get some sleep. It'll probably be restless and I don't want to disturb you, I said, swallowing 2 Tylenol that I passed off as prescription pain medication, then closing the door. I'm here to talk whenever you're ready, Patricia called out as the guest room door shut. I managed to avoid any real conversations or closeness with Patricia over both Saturday and Sunday without much trouble, and I began executing my plan. The initial tasks were straightforward. Using Patricia's credit card on Saturday morning, I ordered 2 small high-tech video cameras and motion detectors for express delivery to the house by Monday. At the library, I printed out the contract that Josephine had emailed me to the account I'd set up for that purpose, immediately deleting it afterward. I also printed out new beneficiary and health insurance forms from my company's database, attaching the contract for X site second to last in the stack, and marked where Patricia needed to sign them all. I knew Patricia would be agreeable over the weekend, but not for long. On Sunday, I handed her the documents, telling her they were updated health, disability, and life insurance forms that needed updating, with her and the kids as co-beneficiaries. I left the documents with her, advising her to read them at her own pace. I knew she wouldn't read everything thoroughly, likely just skimming the first couple. When she noticed her name listed as a beneficiary, she smiled, clearly thinking that despite my distant behavior, divorce wasn't on my mind. With a big grin, she brought the signed documents to me just minutes after I gave them to her. All signed, darling, she announced, as she handed them over while I was setting up a card game with Whitney and Jerry. Thanks, I replied, casually tossing the documents into my open briefcase and dealing the cards. I also contacted the CEO of the company where Roger Mayberry worked, instructing him to arrange security reviews by the federal agency responsible for our security clearances for the 5 employees in Mayberry's division. Due to the sensitive nature of our work, we undergo random security reviews, similar to how some organizations conduct random drug tests, ensuring none of the employees would suspect it was initiated by their employer rather than the government. Monday morning, after the kids left for school, Patricia insisted on having a conversation. David, we can't ignore what happened. If we do, it will bother you and damage our relationship, she began, sitting across the kitchen table from me. I wanted to retort with, what relationship? But held back. Instead, I said, Patricia, my head is still spinning, and I haven't processed what I saw. I need to clear my mind before we can have a meaningful conversation. I won't rush into anything. Okay, darling, she responded after a brief pause, seeming satisfied if not entirely pleased. I hope you feel better soon, though. I really want to show you how much I care about you. My V miss you. I have to go to the country club for a social committee meeting in about half an hour. I'll be back around 2 to pick up the kids from school. Will you be okay without me? She asked. I wanted to say, I'll find out soon enough, but held my tongue again. Have a good time. I'll be fine, I assured her. She was making it too easy. About half an hour after she left, the cameras arrived by courier. I called Jack and he came over. Together, we installed the cameras, switches, and motion detectors in the master bedroom in less than an hour. We wore latex gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints or DNA. Afterward, we set up the feeds to stream to Patricia's computer. While I'm decent with computers, Jack is a genius. All we need is her password, and I can hook up the cameras to her computer in 10 minutes flat. I've got top-notch password cracking software on my laptop. I'll sync mine with hers and get started, Jack announced, still wearing his latex gloves. Once Jack started the program, he began to say, "While this runs," but was interrupted by a beep. "What's that?" I asked. "Is something wrong with it?" "I don't think so. Holy crap, it's already cracked," he laughed. "How is that possible?" I asked in surprise. "The software runs through the 1,000 most common passwords first before it starts the more complex algorithms." Ha! Her password is Princess, the 28th most common one according to the software, Jack explained. "Figures," I chuckled. She never listened to my advice about using more secure passwords with symbols. True to his word, within 10 minutes, Jack had the cameras recording onto Patricia's computer under a discrete file name. 5 minutes later, he set it up so I could access the file remotely from my office and control the cameras and motion detectors. Feeling good on Tuesday, I went into work and activated the cameras and motion detectors before leaving. I arranged for one of my shell companies in the Cayman Islands to transfer $10,000 to Roger Mayberry's bank account. Emotionally, I was feeling better, and physically, I was making good progress recovering from my concussion, so I actually got some real work done. After the kids went to bed on Tuesday night, Patricia approached me. "Why don't you come back to our bed tonight? You must be feeling better if you could work today." "I am," I replied. "I almost feel like my normal self again." Wednesday and Thursday, I almost let myself imagine that Patricia had realized how much she had hurt me, truly loved me, and might even end things with Mayberry. But I didn't let those thoughts stop me from turning on the cameras when I left the house or continuing with my plan, because I knew those hopes were just illusions, not reality. That became clear when I reviewed the video from Thursday afternoon. There was my faithful wife, her face filled with ecstasy as she looked directly at the camera. I could only bear a few minutes of it before fast-forwarding through the entire tape at 16 times normal speed. While part of me felt a grim satisfaction knowing the video could support my bid for sole custody of the kids, a wave of sadness washed over me. Why couldn't she just stay faithful to me around Mayberry? And who knows if there were others? I asked myself rhetorically. Friday morning, I uploaded the video of Patricia's Thursday afternoon affair to the Pay X site, arranged for $5,000 in cash to be delivered to Josephine. And by Friday night, $5,000 had been transferred from the X site to Patricia's bank account. The video was now posted for all paying customers to view. It was unfortunate that Mayberry's face had to be pixelated since the website lacked his consent, but I found satisfaction in the fact that the video was featured on a section titled "Unfaithful Wives Cheating Behind Their Husbands' Backs in Their Marital Bed." How fitting. Over the next 2 weeks, 2 more videos were uploaded to the site, each resulting in $5,000 deposits into Patricia's bank account. Additionally, another $10,000 was wired from a company in the Cayman Islands to Mayberry's bank account. I needed to act swiftly before Patricia and Mayberry saw their end-of-month bank statements and started questioning the situation. During those 2 weeks, I had closeness with Patricia, avoiding intercourse as she requested. I pretended to be emotionally affected when she asked for more, tearfully explaining that I wasn't ready yet. Surprisingly, she responded with understanding. The day after the 3rd video became publicly available, Mayberry underwent a security review. Somehow, the reviewer possessed an unpixelated copy of one of the videos showing Mayberry with Patricia, along with Mayberry's bank statement. Mayberry was the 3rd person interviewed that day within his group, unaware that his interview was particularly significant. Knowing the CEO would receive the lie detector results and interview details, I secured a transcript of Mayberry's interview by the end of the day. After Mayberry was connected to the lie detector and the initial questions were out of the way, the reviewer got to the heart of the matter. "Mr. Mayberry, do you have any personal activities outside of work that could make you vulnerable to blackmail?" "No, I don't think so," Mayberry replied, causing a sharp movement in the lie detector's needle. I'd like to show you a video, Mr. Mayberry, the reviewer said, tapping a few buttons on his iPad. Who is the woman you were intimate with 2 Thursdays ago? Mayberry seemed to pale as he weighed whether to lie or tell the truth, pondering the consequences for his security clearance. Eventually, he confessed, Patricia Banks. Isn't she married to one of your colleagues, David Banks? Well, technically, David works for a related company, even though we share the same building. It's a large complex, Mayberry stuttered. Did you ever consider that having an affair with a married colleague could lead to potential blackmail? I never really thought about that, Mayberry muttered. Have you received payments from foreign sources since your last clearance? Absolutely not, Mayberry asserted indignantly. Let's look at this month's bank statement. What are these deposits from 2 different companies based in the Cayman Islands? There was a long pause. Mayberry nervously replied, I don't know. I've never seen this before. It must be a mistake. A mistake from 2 separate companies in the Cayman Islands whose ownership we can't trace? The reviewer pressed on. Yes, someone is framing me, Mayberry protested, clearly distressed. Was the video of you and Mrs. Banks also fabricated? The reviewer asked, his voice tinged with sarcasm, despite the need to remain impartial. After a few more questions, the interview ended. Mayberry remained silent as the reviewer removed the lie detector electrodes and said, Mr. Mayberry, until further notice, you are prohibited from contacting anyone involved in classified information. This includes Mr. and Mrs. Banks, as well as the 2 companies that deposited money into your account. Violation will result in prosecution. I felt incredibly satisfied the night of Mayberry's interview, really satisfied. Patricia picked up on my good mood and flirted with me after dinner. We went to bed as soon as we were sure the kids were asleep. I knew this would be the last time we were intimate. After we climaxed and lay snuggled together, Patricia spoke in a voice almost as seductive as when she asked Mayberry about another encounter. Darling, how about we rest a while? Then I'll give you BJ, and you duck me. Wow, she's quite the comedian, I chuckled silently before meeting her gaze. Patricia, I'll never again engage with your disgusting V. Who knows how many other Johnsons besides Mayberry have been inside you each week? Disgusting. Her reaction was priceless. After stammering out, what do you mean? And turning red, she babbled incoherently while I laughed. Eventually, she stormed out of bed and went to the guest room. The next day, I got the kids off to school. Patricia gave me nothing but icy stares. Once the kids were gone, I made a phone call, and 30 seconds later, the doorbell rang. It's for you, 403, I chuckled. How dare you talk to me like that, you jerk, Patricia seethed. I won't have too much longer, witch, I replied, now laughing outright. When Patricia opened the door, the process server handed her the divorce papers. All I heard was, Mrs. Patricia Banks? Yes, you've been served. Along with the divorce papers were photos of her in the act with Mayberry and the name of the PayX site with a password to access it. You thought I wouldn't find out about you selling your XSX videos, you sleazy woman? I asked as she stood by the kitchen table, stunned. Have you even seen what you look like on an X website? That's how you find out, I yelled as she held the paper with the X site's information. I couldn't believe it when my assistant brought it to my attention. It's bad enough you disrespect me by sleeping with that jerk in our bed, but then you have to broadcast it and make money. What? I have no idea what's happening, she replied, tears welling up. I'm taking the kids on a weekend trip, I declared as I stood up. Make sure you hire the best lawyer you can. I'm sure your professional earnings on X sites will help, because you're going to need one. That same day, Mayberry was fired and escorted out of the building, his security clearance revoked. About an hour before I was supposed to leave to pick up the kids for the weekend, my secretary called on the intercom. David, there's a report that Roger Mayberry is drunk and in the parking lot yelling your name. Should I call the police? No, Sherry, I chuckled. Call Jack and have him come here right away. This was too perfect to pass up. When Jack arrived, we went to a window in our building where we could see Mayberry. It was a spot with one of the best views from our security cameras. He was clearly drunk, swaying back and forth. We quickly devised a plan. Jack slipped out a side door, staying out of the camera's sight, while I confidently walked out the front entrance. The moment Mayberry spotted me, he shouted, "You damn jerk, Banks! You're the reason I got fired and lost my security clearance. I know it! I'm gonna beat you up!" I jogged over to a spot where Jack was waiting in view of the camera. I let Mayberry get close enough to take a swing at me. Though he only grazed my shoulder, I dramatically fell down as if it were a knockout punch. As Mayberry leaned over me, ready to strike again, Jack appeared on camera, grabbed him, and delivered a solid forearm to his jaw, like tackling a football opponent. Mayberry went flying backward, knocked out cold. Jack helped me up, and I pretended to be dazed, leaning against a nearby car. Jack dialed emergency, all this happening under the watchful eyes of the security cameras, and the police arrived within minutes. Mayberry was handcuffed to a stretcher by the fire department ambulance crew, with a cop accompanying him to the hospital. I filled out the necessary assault charges paperwork, then picked up the kids and whisked them away to a beautiful mountain resort for the weekend. At the end of the weekend, I sat the kids down and told them Patricia and I were getting divorced. Amber seemed relieved, while the other two took it surprisingly well, reassured by my promise that we'd both continue loving them as much as possible. When we returned Sunday night, Patricia wasn't as hostile as I expected. To prepare for a potential blow-up, I had moved my most valuable belongings and a lot of my clothes to a climate-controlled storage unit. Despite this, I had no plans to leave the house. After the kids excitedly recounted our weekend adventures to her, Patricia and I sat down to talk. "I know you set up those cameras, David, though I have no idea how you pulled it off," she said first, surprisingly calm. "No apology, no admission of mistake, no please forgive me," I responded. "Just blaming me for something that all the evidence shows I didn't do," I added, trying to sound indignant in case she was recording us. "I've been busy this weekend, David. I've hired a lawyer and a computer expert. I still don't know how you managed it, but you've covered your tracks well with this unfit mother accusation. I'm hoping we can find a way to agree on custody," she replied. "We can, Patricia. You give me full custody of the kids and the house so they don't have to move. In return, I'll give you generous visitation rights. I'll even buy you a house where you and Mayberry can do whatever you want. Did you hear he's not just out of a job, but out of a career? I don't want to live with Roger or share a house with him. That's not what this is about," she began. "I don't want to hear it, Patricia," I interrupted sharply. Regaining my composure, I continued. "You can live with whoever you want. I honestly don't care. I'm just making an offer." After a pause and a few tears, she continued. "Look, I know you think I'm a terrible mother, but I'm not. I love our kids deeply, and I can't bear the thought of not living with them. Fighting this out in court won't benefit either of us. I know you'll try to smear me every way you can, and I can't handle that. Neither of us wants the kids to know all the details or see those videos." "I agree. We shouldn't let the kids know all the details," I pondered aloud. "What do you suggest?" I asked, genuinely curious. "My lawyer recommends we use a mediator, preferably a former family court judge. I'll aim for sole or joint custody, and you can do the same. We'll let the mediator review everything, including the children's preferences, and will abide by whatever decision is made. This way, we keep everything private and can reach a resolution faster," she replied. I was surprised by her reasonableness. It seemed she recognized my stronger personality, perhaps after talking with Roger Mayberry. "Let's arrange a meeting with our lawyers early next week to discuss the details," I proposed. "I agree with your plan, except for one thing. I won't agree to joint custody under any circumstances. It's too tough on the kids, and I want sole custody. If the mediator orders joint custody, then I'll accept it, but that's the only scenario I'm open to." I moved to the guest room while Patricia took the master bedroom. I didn't explain why to her, not wanting to add to the stress, but I couldn't bear sleeping where Mayberry had been with her. I doubted I could rid the sheets or mattress of every trace of his presence. On Tuesday, we had a joint meeting with our lawyers. We instructed them to follow our requests in a legal manner without bargaining. We drafted a contract that split all our marital assets evenly, except for what was protected by the prenup, which covered 90% of our wealth. The contract included details such as the chosen mediator, a retired family court judge known for fairness, the scheduling of hearings and deadlines for the mediator's decision, the child support I'd pay if Patricia got sole or joint custody, maintenance payments to Patricia for 2 years or until she remarried, rules preventing Patricia from associating with Mayberry in front of the children, an agreement not to influence the children's statements to the mediator, provisions for Patricia's relocation costs if I gained sole custody, and specifics on visitation rights if either of us got custody. It took us a full day to finalize these terms, but we managed to complete the contract. The following day, we secured the mediator who agreed to handle our case, and we set dates for a briefing in 2 weeks and a hearing in 4 weeks. His fees would be split evenly from our joint assets not covered by the prenup. Although I didn't insist on it being in the contract, Patricia and I privately agreed that neither of us would bring anyone else into our shared home. We also decided that whoever had to move out after the custody decision would do so within 2 weeks. Additionally, I directed my lawyer to threaten legal action against the PayXX site unless they removed Patricia's videos and refunded the money. This was resolved quickly with a single call to Josephine. Patricia and I were quite civil with each other while we waited for the hearing. I never tried to influence the kids, and as far as I knew, she didn't either. We avoided making any mean or sarcastic remarks, even in private. The only thing that bothered me was that she sometimes walked around the house without a top on when the kids weren't around or were asleep. I understood her intention, but I couldn't resist asking her about it once out of frustration. "I want you to get one last good look at what you're losing," she said. I couldn't help getting aroused. On the day of the hearing, I was nervous, despite feeling confident that I had the advantage. The worst outcome I expected was joint custody, but I desperately wanted sole custody, so I was nearly frantic. The hearing went fairly well, though just before the judge was about to interview the children, he made some comments that worried me deeply. He seemed inclined towards granting joint custody. Just before interviewing the kids, he threw us a surprise. "I see you've agreed to have my interviews with the children broadcast on closed-circuit TV," the mediator said. "I'm sorry, but I can't agree to that. I didn't realize this until a few minutes ago, but it would undermine the necessary openness and trust I need with the children. If either of you can't accept me meeting with each child privately, I'll have to refund your money and refer you to another mediator. Since the children's interviews are scheduled for tomorrow, a day they're off from school, please let me know your decision by then." I was tempted to refuse and hope for a different mediator who might be less inclined towards joint custody. But my lawyer advised against it, knowing Amber's bias against Patricia and the mediator's history of respecting children's wishes from his time as a judge. Amber was close to the age where state law allowed her to decide, and the judge was likely to value her input more than any other mediator would. Before Patricia and I headed home, we met with our lawyers and agreed to the mediator's condition. We also agreed not to question the children afterward about what they discussed. That evening at dinner, Patricia made comments hinting at her desire for joint custody, which I feared the kids would notice. I gave her a stern look but didn't respond. Amber caught my eye and subtly grinned. The next day, the mediator privately interviewed each child. Jerry's interview was brief, about 20 minutes. Whitney's lasted around half an hour. Amber's took over an hour. When Amber finished, she gave me a discreet thumbs up when she was sure Patricia and her lawyer weren't watching. Following our agreement, Patricia's parents took the kids out for a meal after their interviews, planning to drop them back at our house by 4 p.m. After lunch, the mediator was prepared to announce his decision. It surprised us because he still had a week under the contract to decide. He didn't even want to hear the 30-minute closing arguments prepared by the lawyers. After reviewing all the evidence and considering the children's best interests as most important, I grant sole custody of all 3 children to their father, David Banks. I also find that the pre-case agreement made by both parties is fair and in the children's best interests. The case will be settled based on those terms. I will give you a certified copy of this decision on Monday for submission to family court with your settlement. Thank you for trusting me with this matter, and good luck in the future. Patricia and I both cried, each for different reasons. The ride home was quiet and sad. I didn't feel like gloating, and Patricia was deeply upset. The sadness of our family breaking up, even though it ended as well as it could for me given the circumstances, weighed heavily on me once again. That evening, when we broke the news to the children, Patricia was distant, so I did most of the talking. Jerry and Whitney were sad and hugged Patricia sincerely. Amber gave her a brief hug. I spoke kindly about Patricia and explained the visitation arrangements to the kids. Within a week of the hearing, I bought another house for Patricia, and she moved in within the agreed 2-week period. The children and I, along with her parents and brother, helped her move. We hired movers for the larger items she took from our house, including the king-size bed from the master bedroom. A few months later, when the divorce was final, I threw a celebration at my house to thank everyone who had supported me, my closest friends and my parents. I didn't tell the children the purpose of the party, just that we were celebrating in general. Amber, now 13, of course, figured it out. Just before the guests arrived and I was making final preparations in the den, she came in and closed the door. She made me sit down, then sat on my lap. "Dad, how happy are you with how the custody turned out?" Amber asked, surprising me with her mature question. "I'm really happy, Amber. Why do you want to know?" I replied. She grinned widely. "I had a feeling it would work out when I talked to the mediator. I told him about catching Mom and that Mayberry in the act in our house when I came home sick one day. It really messed me up. Did you actually see them? I asked, taken aback. Does it matter, really? Mom was cheating, and I wouldn't have wanted to live with her anyway. I knew it was best for Jerry and Whitney to stay with us, she explained with a big smile. She kissed my cheek, then jumped off my lap and left. I decided to drop the subject altogether. But what I did focus on next, starting with the victory celebration, was Josephine. She showed up to the party looking fantastic. She immediately connected with Jerry and Whitney. She played catch and pepper with Jerry for a good 30 minutes, a game I was never good at. Josephine spent time alone with Whitney. I'm not sure what they talked about, but they were chatting and laughing together for a solid hour. Amber was a bit quieter around Josephine compared to the other kids, but she also seemed to like her, and they talked about fashion. Josephine made sure I wasn't left out of bonding with our family. During the party, she took me aside in the den, grabbed me, and said, "Have your parents stay with the kids tonight and come home with me." As I was leaving, I said to Josephine, "I don't know what you see in me, but I really enjoy being with you. Is there a chance for us to have a real relationship?" She looked into my eyes and replied, "What I see in you is a kind, generous, smart, giving person and great in bed. Why don't you take me to a resort on the weekend of the 14th for 3 days? We can see if we both want something serious. Honestly, I'm tired of messing around. I want a man who's just mine." She kissed me again and closed the door, saying, "Get home to those wonderful kids." 2 years after my victory party, my life has seen several changes. All 3 kids are thriving, happy, well-adjusted, and doing great in school, socially, and in their activities. Patricia has been respectful and has made good use of her visitation rights without any issues. Amber now has a much better relationship with her mom than when we were all together. In fact, Amber even spent 10 days last summer at Patricia's parents' lake house with her and the other kids, and had only positive things to say when she returned. My business is thriving, and I'm making more money than ever. There was an accidental disclosure of my ownership of the operating companies when a government report was sent to employees who weren't supposed to see it. Fortunately, it hasn't affected how anyone treats me at work. Roger Mayberry left town right after the victory party. The only person who still keeps in touch with him says he now has a basic sales job with an electronics company on the West Coast that doesn't handle sensitive technology. The children have fully accepted Josephine. They all see her more as a friend than a mother figure and genuinely enjoy spending time with her. After 2 years of being intimate whenever possible, Josephine decided that we should commit to each other exclusively. Last month, she sold her ex-website and moved in with the kids and me. Even though she isn't interested in marriage, she only wants me and is eager to take on a role as a friend and mother figure to the kids. At the same time, she runs a small online clothing store from an extension I built onto the house. While the extension was being built, I also had top-notch soundproofing installed in the master bedroom.